Well, I'm pleased to announce that we have author E Ryecart here on the show. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Those of you who have listened to the show for at least a little bit of time know that I am a crazy, bonkers, enthusiastic fan of her Jack and Rory series, which she started last year. And she has a brand new installment, and AE is here to talk a little bit about that book. It's called A Christmas Wedding. And AE, can you give us a little bit of background about the first book and sort of the origin stories of Rory and Jack?
Sure, yes. Okay, A Kiss Before Christmas was last year's offering, and it's a fake boyfriend story. And Rory pitches up in Jack's life by huddling on his doorstep during a winter storm just before Christmas. So of all the doorsteps, of all the houses in London that he could have chosen, yeah, he ends up on Jack's because, you know, this is romance after all. Yeah, he's got nowhere to live, and Jack, out of the kindness of his heart, takes him inside and gives him a cup of tea, yeah, because this is England, a sandwich, and basically Rory never actually leaves. And because Jack is so good to him, he sort of really saved his life on this, you know, nasty winter's night. He agrees to pretend to be Jack's new hot boyfriend, but of course he isn't, because Jack has a function to go to that's very posh, and his ex-boyfriend who dumped him is going to be there, so he feels he's got something to prove. And of course, you know, as you would expect, the fake feelings turn to warmer, more loving feelings. And yeah, it's a fake boyfriend who turns out not to be so very fake in the end. And
then Rory and Jack's story continued on into the spring with the second story.
Yes, that's right. That is an Easter promise. And what happens there is that these two are now together, and they go down to the De Lacy ancestral home in deepest Devonshire to meet Jack's parents. And things go wrong. Jack's parents are good people, but his mother, Diana, is indomitable. She really is. She's a force of nature, and she's not very trusting of Rory, at least to begin with. He gets involved in the village bake-off. He helps to judge the cutest pet in show competition, and he really does win over the family. And you know, there's an incident out on the moors on a stormy night, you know, because this is Devonshire, this is Dartmoor, you know, this is heavy stuff. And of course, it all ends up very nicely. And there's a dog. Of course, there's a dog. There's a dog called Badger, who's Rory's best friend, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Cutest dog ever. And he actually happens to make an appearance in the third installment, the recently released A Christmas Wedding. So bring us up to date. Where are Rory and Jack at now?
Okay. This is 2 years on from when they first meet, and during that time they've opened a very successful bakery business. The Bakehouse, it's called. It's an artisan bakery because Rory by profession is a baker, and so this business is going from strength to strength, and so they're very stressed out. It's Christmas, they've got lots of orders, and so Jack's mum, Lady Diana, takes over the wedding planning. And Rory's very uneasy about it, really. He doesn't feel like he's involved enough. He feels that she's taking over, you know, additional guests get added to the guest list and so on. That simple winter wedding that they both wanted so much is turning into a bit of a society do. And it's not them. But, you know, they're tough, doughty boys, and they do stand up to Diana, and they get the wedding of their dreams. And there's a few surprises along the way. So there's issues about family and reconnection and being accepted, and sort of, you know, rising above difficulties that life can throw at you. And I've left it a little bit open at the end so that, you know, there's room for more in this whole Jack and Rory universe if I go down that route.
Mm-hmm. And most importantly, in this installment, there's still lots of wonderful holiday food and an utterly hilarious story about Desmond the Donkey.
Oh, Oh, I love Desmond the Donkey. I tell you, that really is the toned down version because I was going for it big time with a good head and his antics in the church. But yeah, I just loved it. I was in hysterics as I was writing it. And what I particularly liked about that scene with Desmond is that it's been told by Diana in a very straight-faced, rather rigid way. And against all this, Rory's getting gently pissed in the background by getting up close and personal with Mr. Merlot. So yeah, that's a good scene. I like that one. I'm glad you did too.
Mm-hmm. And food, of course. I think your books have been part of the reasons why we've been so turned on by mince pie. And she actually brought mince pies.
Oh, she's got some. Yummy.
With a cute snowflake on top. We will be trying your recipe later in this season, so we'll be checking that out.
Now, the three stories that sort of make up the ongoing story arc in Jack and Rory's love saga, there is a continuing story, but I think you've said yourself that each story stands on its own and can be read without the previous volumes.
I think it's always better if books can be read in order, but you really don't have to do that with any of the Rory and Jack books, or indeed with anything I write. You can take a book out of order and not be thinking who, what, where, why, because what needs to be explained is explained where it's needed.
And that's really good. I like stories I could do that because you've talked so much about A Christmas Wedding. I may have to pick that up before the season's over.
You should. I highly recommend it.
And you love Christmas stories, and you actually have another one that will be out by the time this actually airs. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this one is called The Boss of Christmas Present, and it's a very light nod towards A Christmas Carol. It's a contemporary, and it's set in London, as most of my books are. And it's about an arrogant, selfish man, the boss. He's not a good guy to work for. He's all about himself. He's a bit of a slave driver to his staff, and he has his PA who's very much put upon. But this guy, the PA, Jordan, he has a crush on Conrad, and he's been working there for a couple of years at the Ryder Corporation. And he's thinking it's no good. I'm going to have to move on. I can't take it much longer. What happens is Jordan gets offered some interviews for other jobs, and Conrad finds out, and it's a bit of a wake-up call because he then thinks, how am I going to function, not just his office, but Jordan runs his life. He books his weekends away with his various men. He takes his suits to the dry cleaners. He gets his groceries delivered, and it's a bit of a wake-up call for him. And he has a conversation with a good friend who doesn't take any rubbish from him and says, look, you've got to start treating people better. And what happens, I don't want to give too much away, but Jordan and Conrad, they both end up on their own on Christmas Day. But of course they don't end up on their own because they end up with each other. So I don't want to say too much more. I mean, it's a little novella. It's only about 26,000 words, but it is sweetness overload. It really is. I mean, this is like mince pies on steroids. Yeah, I'm not going to be responsible for any sort of tooth decay that comes from reading this story, especially as there's a three-legged dachshund in it who has a Christmas jumper. So I think that gives you a bit of a taste for what's going on here. But I loved writing it. I thought it was fun. It was fun to write, and it was nice, light relief.
And I have to ask, having heard the name of the donkey and the name of the dog and the Rory and Jack book, what is the dachshund named? Dodo.
He's Dodo the dubious dachshund, because he's a bit of a dachshund mix, actually, and he's only got 3 legs.
Poor dachshund. That's just sad. Now, you've released a lot of books this year. Let's talk about a few of the other ones you put out. Back in August, you put out Release, which is a Rent Boys novel. Tell us about that and what we have to expect in other Rent Boys novels.
Okay, well, I'm going to start working on book 2 in the series just as soon as the next Christmas book is out. But yes, Release was actually born out of a little novelette that came out about this time last year called Company for Christmas, which was about a rather hapless rent boy. And that's a Cinderfella story. So instead of a glass slipper, there's a warm woolly coat and so on. And one of the housemates of Nathan the rent boy in that story is called Sean. And Sean is pretty much the head of the household of this little found family. And as I was writing that, I just thought to myself, this guy needs a story. He really does. He really sort of like took me by the throat and gave me a good old shake. And so that's really how the Rent Boys series started. Now, what I should say is that Release is about finding a new life. It's an opposite as attract story. So it's the rent boy and the art historian, two people who should never, ever have met. But they have a lot in common, although they come from very different backgrounds. And both are trapped in these lives that they don't want. Sean wants desperately to leave his life on the streets, but he is crippled by self-doubt because this is all he can do. And when the book opens, he's getting steadily drunk in the bar because he's had a day where he's just been knocked back. He's gone for jobs and he's been told, well, what have you been doing since you were 16? You've got no track record. You know, who's going to employ you? And so he sees no way out. And in the same way, the art historian, Rory, he has a very confined, very ordered, very traditional life. And he thinks he likes it like that, but he's starting to feel a little bit bored, a little bit hemmed in. And when they meet, that is the catalyst for their lives to change. Hence the title, it's about release. It's about release from lives that don't fulfill them in any sort of meaningful or emotional way. And, you know, they come together and they give something to each other that is missing. They are each other's jigsaw piece that they don't have to complete the picture.
Where do you see this series going? You mentioned you're going to start working on the next book here shortly.
Yes, I want to sort of work through the rest of the housemates because they are very much a found family. They live in this pit of a house, but they are a very strong unit. And of course, Rory has now sort of come into that house as well. And he has a friend. He's got a friend who is quite a difficult person, and his name is Toby, and he plays quite a role in Release. He's got a very hard shell, but yeah, there's a lot going on in the background, and it's going to be his story and the story of one of the housemates who's called Ben. And I've got lots of ideas that are starting to brew with this story.
That's exciting. Something to look forward to for sure. Mm. And you've also got your Deviant Hearts series that had a new book this year. Yes. Yeah, that's another trilogy. I do like trilogies. I'm not one for long series, either for writing them or indeed reading them. I get series burnout, I think. Yeah, Deviant Hearts, that is what I would say is my romantic suspense series. And the first one is Captive Hearts, and that's a crime boss and his kept boy, if I can put it like that. And he's rescued from his situation by the guy who is employed to be his minder, gopher, somebody to drive him around. And as the books go on, I ramp up the suspense element until we get to the last book in the series, which is Perilous Heart. And that is essentially a psychological thriller. There's a lot of gaslighting going on. There's a stalker. One of the main characters really does start to doubt his sanity because of the things that are happening to him. Little things, drip, drip, drip things. Finding food in the fridge that he never bought. Finding things moved around in the flat that he never moved. And against all this going on, and you obviously find out why it's going on and who's doing it, although it becomes quite obvious who's doing it, but it's not a who done it, it's why they're doing it, not who's done it, but why. But against all this, there's a friends to lovers romance story going on. And
I'm really proud of this book because it's something that has my stamp as Ryecart, but I've taken the route that I never thought I would have taken, which is down that whole suspense psycho thriller road, and I just loved writing it. I had a really good time.
So more psychological thriller, romantic suspense coming soon, since you enjoyed that?
Yes. So I'm coming towards a bit of a crossroads in my writing, to be honest. It's something that I've been thinking about for quite some time, but it feels like it's coming to a head now. So I think looking into next year, yes, there is the Rent Boys series to continue with, and maybe there'll be some more Rory and Jack. We'll just have to see how that goes. But there are two strands. There's the whole sort of romantic suspense, the psychological thriller stuff that I really did enjoy writing, and I think that's something I could seriously get my teeth into. So as Ryecart, I want to go more down that route. But writing the Rory and Jack stories, they were partly an experiment to see if I could write those sort of sweeter, more heartwarming, more heartfelt stories, because I hadn't written anything like that up until I did A Kiss Before Christmas last year. So I didn't know if I could do it, because my previous work is nothing like that. It's much grittier, much heavier. But because I found that I could, and because I found that I enjoyed doing it, I'm looking at two strands. Now, whether I do both of these strands as Ryecart, or whether I do one under another pen name, but not disguising that it's me, that it's the same person, I don't know. And I am flip-flopping backwards and forwards in my thinking. I lie in bed at night sometimes thinking, yes, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. And then, no, I won't. That's a crazy idea. That's really stupid. It's not. Oh, yes, it is. It's not. Yes, it is. And it's all a bit like that.
So you mentioned while we were talking about Deviant Hearts that it had the stamp of Ryecart on it. What are those things that make the Ryecart stamp?
Oh, the Ryecart. I like that. The Ryecart. Gritty and hard-edged, often with a big injection of realism running through the books. Many of the Ryecart books are very much rooted in an environment that I know. So they're set in parts of London that I know because I've lived in them, I've worked in them, I've known them, on a social basis, if I can put it like that. And so I like to bring that realism into my stories. So that's partly what I mean by the realism. And my characters often tend to be they're very complex. Sometimes they're not easy to like. They do the wrong things. Quite often they do the wrong things, and you think, why are you doing that? You're just making it worse. But I think life is often like that. We all make these decisions that sometimes we know we should not be making them, but we do them all the same. And I think in a lot of my books that is infused through them. So you wouldn't pick up a book by E Ryecart for a light and fluffy read. Except the Christmas books.
I was going to say, except maybe for the Rory and Jack books.
Yeah, no, they are. They do have my stamp in as much that it's the same style, but I've gone down different routes, obviously, for those books. So with the Christmas books, it's the characters are on the lighter side of life, even if they don't experience the lighter side of life at times. The guys in the other books are much more screwed up in many ways.
What got you started writing gay romance?
Yeah, I do get asked this a lot. And the answer was the Kindle. I was bought a Kindle for Christmas a few years ago now, and I resisted the Kindle with a lot of power. I didn't want them. I just like my paperback books, but I got a Kindle, and as you know, there's all the free and the really cheap books that we're all sort of churning out. And I was downloading all sorts of things. I mean, I was a big reader of non-fiction rather than fiction. Lots of travel writing, lots of sort of like, socio-political stuff, that sort of thing. But I was downloading everything. And I do quite like sort of horror and supernatural in fiction. And I don't really know how I did it, but I downloaded a shifter story, and it was a gay shifter story. And I thought, what the hell is this? I've never heard of anything like this. And I can't remember who wrote it, but I read it and I thought, oh, this is really good. This is really good fun. It was totally silly. But I started devouring these shifter books, and it introduced me to this whole world that I had no idea existed. And so, shifters became a bit like cupcakes in that, I just had enough. I couldn't stomach any more of them, and I was looking for something a bit beefier and a bit meatier. So I started actually looking for contemporary, which is what I like. And I started to discover writers and just started reading. I ended up losing my job. I got made redundant, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I started my first book, which is called Imperfect. And I approached it as a hobby. So I'd write a little bit and then leave it for a couple of weeks and then go back to it. And I wrote it in longhand because, I know, like something like a 75,000 word book. And I wrote probably about 95% of it in longhand, because if I went onto the computer, I felt really guilty because I thought, I've got to be looking for a job. I should be on the internet. I shouldn't be sort of, tapping in my story. So I wrote this book in a complete vacuum. I'd never heard of Goodreads, or barely. I didn't know about all these Facebook groups. I didn't know that readers really didn't like an MC who cheated. Hey, and guess what? Yeah, so I got hammered in a lot of quarters for that book, because one of the MCs, he does cheat, but not on the person that he ends up with. I mean, he's completely self-aware. He knows what he's doing, and he knows that he's a bit of a bastard, frankly. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care until he gets with the guy that he ends up with. But what's quite interesting about that book, which contains all the newbie mistakes you can imagine, they're filling out the pages, but that book has garnered me some of my most loyal readers, and they've just stuck with me.
Had you had any inclination to writing before you started that book because of the MM you'd been reading?
Not really, no. Language and storytelling fascinates me, but I never had any particular ambitions to do it myself. And also I was like, busy building another life, building a career, setting up a home. Life was just very busy, so I didn't have any room for writing, even if I thought about it. But until the event of the Kindle and the whole self-publishing revolution got underway, it was almost impossible to write, because you had to get through all those gatekeepers who did their best to keep you down, really. But it's a much more democratic world now in terms of writing. If you want to write, you can write and publish. Not always wise, but that opportunity is there. So it's only really once I started reading this genre that, as I say, I just didn't know about it, didn't know it existed until I really did stumble on it by accident, that I thought, well, actually, I can do this, because I read lots and lots of books, and I read some fantastic stuff, real good books that I reread even now. And I read some really dreadful ones, but it was enough to make me think, actually, this looks like a good gig. I'm going to have a go myself. And I'm actually quite a cautious person naturally, but I do have these, I don't know, I think my brain short wires sometimes, and I'll just do something that's completely out of character. And just turning my back on what was a well-paid job to do something that held no security whatsoever was a pretty big step. But that's the best thing I ever did.
You hinted a bit ago about what was coming in 2020. Anything else you want to throw out there about what's coming soon?
Well, as I was saying, I'm really looking at 2 tracks. I'm very, very keen on going down the psychological thriller suspense road, and I'm reading more of that type of stuff in MM at the moment. And I've been reading quite a lot of Gregory Ash, who is really good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really enjoying his books, and that's actually been good for me because I've been very much going down the mainstream MM romance route, if you like. But of course, there's all this other MM stuff out there, the other subgenres that are there, and I really feel that I'm starting to know what I want to write going forward. But as I say, it's a 2-pronged thing. I've really enjoyed the sweeter stories, and I do like stories about sort of home and family, like found family, making connections and so on. And I am thinking that maybe I should spread my wings and get on a plane, so to speak, and sort of land somewhere in any Townsville, America, and set some stories in a small town. But exactly how to do it, and I've got some really good story ideas that I've jotted down with something old fashioned called a pen on something that's called paper. So I've jotted those down. I think they could fly actually. But again, it's something that I want to sit down and sort of talk through with others who've been in this sort of situation, because I know that they're out there. So in short, what I see is me going down two tracks. This is how I see it. Whether it will happen, who knows. Does that make sense? It probably doesn't.
It does.
Yes, it does.
I'm very interested to see what comes in 2020.
You're not alone. When you see it, send me the memo.
So what's the best way for everyone to keep up with you online so they can see what you do put out next year?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm on Facebook, obviously, as E Ryecart, and I'm actually working on a new website at the moment, but I'm doing it piecemeal. It's something I've got to knuckle under, but that's aeryecart.com. And if anybody's interested in finding out more about my work and knowing what I'm doing, what I'm reading, what I recommend, then they can go there in order to sign up to my mailing list, which is just a very chatty, irreverent monthly newsletter. It's the paper or the screen version of this, basically, where I just ramble. But I talk about what I've been reading and what I've been listening to, because I've got into audio, and I've actually got an audio out there, just one at the moment, and that's Captive Hearts, which is the first in the Deviant Hearts series, and I've been really thrilled by the response to that. People are liking the story. The story seems to have translated very well to that format, and the narrator Dan Kelly is absolutely brilliant. He's got a really, really gruff, sexy voice. Nice London accent going on in there.
Fantastic. Well, AE, we really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us, not only about your various series, but about your love for sweet Christmas romances as well. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.